It's our first mailbag episode of the off season. Got a lot of questions to talk about or answer. And one is, where do the Braves go from here? I'll answer that question and many more on today's mailbag podcast of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Make sure you check out my written work over at bravestoday.com as well. Make sure that you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast on this mailbag episode. I'll be answering the questions that you submitted there on social media to our mailbag opening question that we had there. So be looking out for that every Friday, mailbag episodes throughout the offseason, really throughout the entire year. I did them through the regular season as well. So make sure that you look for that tweet, post, whatever you want to call it, whenever I send those out, usually on Thursday or sometimes Friday afternoon. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Of over 7,500 subscribers there. So thank you for all the support. You're watching this video there. Hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment, all those good things to help support the show and grow things here. Thank you so much for all the support that you give me here at Locked On Braves. Thank you for all the everydayers out there as well. I forget to add them on here to give you everybody a shout out, but thanks for letting me know that you're an everydayer down in the comments section. I do see all of those. So thank you so much for letting me know that you support the show each and every day. It is our mailbag episode. Got a lot of great questions to get to. Really excited to get into these mailbag episodes throughout the off season. Typically some of the most fun ones that we do. I'll be starting by answering questions that were submitted on social media, and then whoever we got here live watching with me as well, I'll take some questions from them later in the podcast. But let's start with the questions that we have from social media. And first, I'm going to give you my own question. I think this is kind of in there, but where do the Braves go from here as we enter the offseason? And we'll have more of a full-fledged offseason preview coming up later. But where do the Braves go from here? You got a World Series champion contending roster. Where do you go from here? And, some people aren't probably going to like what I have to say this offseason. I don't think there's much to do. It's hard for me to see Alex Anthopoulos going in here and blowing it up because the Braves had two early exits against a really good and hot Phillies team. Something's got to change, mindset, whatever it is, they got to figure it out. But you're talking about back-to-back 100-win seasons. This team is good enough to win a World Series. So I think this offseason has the potential to be pretty boring. And I know no fan wants to hear that after getting bounced early in the postseason. But I think you'll see some moves in the bullpen for sure. Those have to be made. You'll probably, maybe see a depth sign or two to the starting rotation. Also, Braves have already spent a lot of money. We got a question in here talking about the Braves payroll as well. It's already a pretty big payroll going into next season. So I don't know how much money they're actually going to have to spend. Obviously, a lot may depend on the Charlie Morton situation, some of the other contract options, which we'll talk about next week. So again, I don't know where the Braves go from here because you already have a World Series contending roster. It's all about getting hot at the right time, having the right mindset going into the postseason and getting it done at this point. I mean, they have the guys to get it done. They just got to perform in the postseason. They haven't in the past 2 years. So let's jump into the questions here. First one coming from Cavs Buckeyes, who has a couple on here. And I'm not going to read the whole post, but he essentially asked about the playoff situation and baseball seasons are 162 games for a reason. It's the ultimate large sample sport. He referenced a conversation from Brad Rowland and the guys over at Battery Power who do a great job over there, and talking about, 162 and it being somewhat meaningless with this postseason format. And there needing to be some sort of reward, accomplishment, for the regular season. And I agree with that 110%. And if you hadn't already, make sure you go back and check out the podcast we did. I believe it was on Tuesday, but it's titled, Does the Postseason Format Need to Change? And I do a deep dive. I go on a big spiel about 162 not mattering anymore and how I think that could be detrimental for the sport of baseball. If you have fans that are suddenly going to tune out for 162 games and just wait on the postseason, if that's all that matters. Look, some people may make fun of a regular season trophy, and it sounds like sour grapes now as a Braves fan who just had a team that had the best record, was clearly the best team in baseball in the regular season, and then got bounced in the first round. That I'm sitting here yelling for a regular season trophy. But I think something like that needs to exist, or you're going to lose a lot of focus on 162. And that's what historically has made this game so great. And I've said this plenty of times. I talked about it on that podcast. The postseason is not about who's the best team in baseball. Sometimes it works out that way. I think last year was a perfect example. I thought the Astros were easily the best team in baseball all year long and through the postseason. But it doesn't always work out like that. And the more that you expand it, the more chaos and upsets you're going to have, because this is baseball and anything can happen in a 5-game series and a 7-game series. That's just not the right length of time, in my opinion, to determine always who's the best team. That's why you play 162. And that's kind of what Cavs Buckeyes post was alluding to. So yeah, I kind of gave my thoughts and opinions on that earlier in the week on that podcast. You want to go back and check that out. Another one from Cavs Buckeyes says, should Alex Anthopoulos make a surprise move at short like he did at catcher last year? Arcia deserves all the credit in the world for stepping up as an everyday player, but I'm not convinced that he's a 90 WRC plus next year. I think so. Look, I like Orlando Arcia, and I said this coming into the season. I said, you can put him at shortstop. I think he'll do a fine job there, and you can bat him 8th, 9th in the lineup, and I think he'll do a fine job. He did better than that. He was an all-star, obviously tailed off in the second half, but he has a good arm. He doesn't have a lot of range. He's not going to win a Gold Glove at shortstop. I don't see him. He's still in his prime, I guess, 28, 29, but I don't see him outperforming his offensive numbers from 2023. That might be the best season we see from Orlando Arcia again. If I, have to eat my words on that, I certainly will. But like I would certainly be looking at other options. Something that I would do, and I talked about this before, talked about it some last offseason, I would go to the Orioles, who have a logjam of middle infielders, whether it's, Westberg, Mayo, all those guys. They have a ton of infielders over there. Obviously, they're not getting rid of Gunnar Henderson, but maybe you take one of those other infielders that they have who can play a good shortstop, and you go and get a young shortstop who can play the position, can be there for a long time. Maybe you swap a pitcher in that, whatever the Orioles may need. They obviously have a great talented farm system over there, so they may not need much. But, I would look at something like that, going out and getting a young prospect, shortstop prospect, as Diamondbacks are absolutely blowing this game against the Phillies right now. Hard to watch. But if I'm the Braves, I'm still looking at a long-term option at shortstop. I'm not convinced they think Vaughn Grissom is that. Clearly, Braden Shoemake isn't that. I don't think Nacho Alvarez is that. And I don't know who else in the system is going to be your shortstop. Ambior Severus isn't that. If I'm the Braves, I go and look at a team that has some really talented, shortstop prospects that have a logjam there. And I see if you can work out a deal and go see if you can find that young shortstop that can be your next, Dansby Swanson, that you can have in your, not necessarily coming through your system, but somebody who you bring over that's going to be there for a long time. That's what I would do. They're not going to go out and sign a shortstop. There's really not any out there to sign. But to answer your question, kind of long-winded answer here, yeah, I think if there is a way to upgrade shortstop over Arcia this offseason, we know Alex is going to explore all possible options. I would definitely be looking at ways to do that. And again, Baltimore is probably the first team that I'd call, and I'd say, hey, what can we do to help you out in a position? Most likely would have to be in the pitching department, and let us get one of your young, talented infielders. So, yeah, it's definitely a position I would be looking to upgrade if it were me. Another one from Cav says, where are we on Liberty Media's timeline to eventually get a top 5 payroll? So Braves were top 10 this year. They were either 9th or 10th, depending on what outlet that you look at. I believe they're already top 5 going into next year, but obviously you'll have a lot of money spent this offseason. So top 5 payroll this year, again, I think they're right there. They were over the luxury tax this year, so they're going to have to start worrying about that a little bit. So I think they're right there. I think this could be the season. It depends. The more that you go over the luxury tax, the harsher the penalties become, especially the more years you do it in a row. But they've already done it once. I think it's 3 years in a row is where you really get the penalties. So they might as well go over again. And then maybe the year after that, you see them kind of tune things back down. But I think this is definitely the year to go for it if you wanted to be that top 5 payroll. Again, they've made strides to be there, and we're top 10 this year. And again, it's early, but for next year, they're already a top 5 payroll. So I think this is definitely the year you could see that happen. Coming off another year where they had huge attendance numbers, all of that, this definitely feels like the time for that to happen. I got a lot of other questions from social media to get to, and I see some coming in live in the comments section. I'll try to get to all those questions here and next. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world today, from unrest in the Middle East, fires, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes. I know we get them a lot here in Alabama during the springtime. You never exactly know when those are going to pop up. That's why it's so important to be prepared when these disasters strikes with the medical needs that you have. The Jase case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacteria infections. You can customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase is continually working to expand their medication offerings. I got my Jase case in the mail not long ago, had a lot of great stuff in there that you would need in an emergency situation. The process to fill out the form and everything was super simple. Like I said, just arrived in the mail maybe about a week later. You can go to jasemedical.com, enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. You can also purchase gift cards for family members there or loved ones so that you make sure that they are taken care of in an emergency situation with a Jase case of their own. You continue to get all the postseason action with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Let's jump back into the questions here. Next one coming from Bellfire says, Vaughn Grissom has clearly shown a very consistent bat in AAA this year. That seems like it will play in the bigs if given consistent at bats. Do you think we see him in the majors next season, and in what role? And how would you use him if that answer is different? So I'm probably going to do a whole podcast on Vaughn Grissom because I just think it's obviously, a topic that people want to discuss. And I think I can do, an entire segment just talking about the options. But to keep it brief here, the options are you trade them. And I only trade them if I'm getting somebody with years of control, whether somebody to plug in left field or, a starting pitcher, mid-rotation type pitcher that has years of control. That's the only way I'd trade Vaughn Grissom. Another option is they still believe he could be that shortstop and supplant Arcia at some point. Or what I have kind of been lobbying for a while now is that he become that Chris Taylor, Kike Hernandez type role player that the Dodgers have used, those guys where he can play all kinds of different positions. You start working him into the outfield and you find ways to get his bat in the lineup 4 or 5 days a week. Problem is, Braves lineup is pretty much set. You have maybe an option in left field. You really don't even at DH with Ozuna coming back. So it's just hard to find spots for him. But I would hate to just get rid of him and then Ozzie gets hurt or Arcia gets hurt, or maybe he takes a big step back and you don't have that insurance, because Vaughn Grissom's really the only reliable middle infield insurance that you have right now in this system. Nicky Lopez, obviously he's under control and coming back, but he's a defense only type of player. Vaughn Grissom is the only one right now that I would feel comfortable putting in there every day and giving you good production. So again, I'll probably do a deeper dive on Vaughn Grissom later in the offseason, but those are, real quickly, 3 options that I would say you have with Vaughn Grissom. Another one from Bellfire: which of the young starters impressed you the most this season, and which ones, if any, do you see having a long-term meaningful contribution to the Braves rotation? So I got to obviously say AJ Smith-Shawver, because he's one of the top prospects. It's either him or Hurston Waldrop, 1 overall. So I think, he has the ability to be in that rotation and be a good pitcher for a while if he can put it all together. Darius Vines impressed me. He's somebody I was not very high on coming into the season, and I thought he looked pretty good. Alan Winans had some good starts as well, and I just liked his, composure coming up and having some big starts. So both, those two guys impressed me. They're both back of the rotation arms, though. It's not somebody I could see really being in the rotation for a long time. I don't know if you consider Bryce Elder in this mix, but I know he had a rough second half, but I still believe he's somebody that's going to be in a big league rotation for a while, a fourth, fifth starter type. I think what we saw in the first half, obviously we know now is kind of fool's gold, but I still think he'll be a solid back of the rotation starter for a while. Another one from Cavs Buckeye says, let's get silly. If Shohei wants to sign his inevitable mega deal when he's closer to full strength, could AA pull off a 1 to 2 year contract with a massive AAV? In general, are there any candidates for that Josh Donaldson style contract despite the weak free agent class? No, I don't think Ohtani would do that. I think even on a 1 or 2 year deal, he's probably going to get 35, 40 million just because his offense is still MVP level. So I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't really know anybody else out there that would fit that type of deal. Corey Slovic says, is Jesse Franklin a legitimate option in left field next year if Rosario isn't brought back? I don't think so. I don't think Jesse Franklin is ready. He missed half of this past season. When he came back, he was okay. He's not so dominant against righties that I think you'd feel comfortable with, bringing him up here to kind of fill that role. But, I could certainly, maybe mid-season, but I don't think to start the year. I think he needs, a little bit more time. You look at his numbers versus righties this year, 795 OPS, 473 slugs. So, I mean, those are obviously solid numbers, what we're talking about at AA. So I would not count on Jesse Franklin replacing Eddie Rosario, at least not to start the year. Franklin, maybe, second half of next year, if he gets off to a good start. I think I've somewhat put a Jock Peterson comp on him. I think he can be that big lefty swinging type of bat, but I wouldn't count on it going into the season. Forrest Wall says, why is Jake the only Braves reporter that I can stand? I don't know, but I'm glad that you do. Thanks for supporting the show. Make sure I haven't missed any here on social media. I got a couple more. Garrett's Brave says, what starting pitcher that the Braves would go after? I like Mitch Keller, maybe like an Aaron Nola, but that's a long shot, but could be an option. I don't really like Mitch Keller. I've seen a couple of outlets mentioning Mitch Keller for the Braves. I'm not as much into that one. I think if it's going to be any free agent, I wrote about Sonny Gray the other day. I think he's somewhat of a possibility. Again, a lot depends on if Charlie Morton comes back. If Charlie Morton doesn't come back, then I think you have some options that you can go after. I don't think the Braves are going to get a front line. I don't think they're going to get a Nola, a Snell, probably not even a Sonny Gray. I think Jordan Montgomery may have even priced himself out of the Braves range with what he's done in the postseason. I think it will be more of like a, I don't know, somebody on a bounce back, like a Lucas Giolito, something like that. An Alex Cobb, maybe a Marcus Stroman. I'm just kind of looking down free agent names here. It's really not great, but I see them getting more of a mid-rotation starter that you can get maybe 10 million a year, 10, 12 million a year. Those are kind of the starters that I think the Braves will go after. And again, a lot depends on Charlie Morton's situation. Scott McIntyre, I think Snit is a great manager for the regular season. Playoffs require more urgency. Any thoughts on the possibility of Washington or Weiss managing in the playoffs? They're all managing in the playoffs. And just to be quite honest, a lot of pregame stuff and decision-making comes from the front office. Snicker did a great job in 2021. Again, I don't know what he could have done differently this postseason to get it done. He can't hit for these guys. So no, I think, Snicker's your guy for better or worse. Ramsey Latimer, if you could add one MLB player to Braves roster to provide the missing leadership and energy, particularly in the postseason, who would it be? Bryce Harper. I mean, that is I don't always love the guy, and, I'm staring down Arcia. I think that's kind of childish, but he definitely brings that flair and that energy that you need in the postseason. He obviously has that clutch gene. So if I could take one player, not thinking about contract status, who they play for, any of that, I would take Bryce Harper right now for sure. Ryan Hall, coming off the production he had this year, is now the time to trade Ozuna. I feel like he could get a really good return for a pitcher, who would you target? I just don't think the return's going to be that great for Ozuna. He's still owed $18 million next year. That's a pretty good price tag for a DH only player with 1 year of control. I don't know what you're expecting to get for him. So I just don't see it. And, you know, as great as he was in the Braves clubhouse this year, I'm sure there's still going to be some concerns from other teams on him. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to selling high on him because I don't think he's going to do 40 and 100 next year. So I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just don't know what the return would be that you'd be getting. Maybe you get a mid-rotation starter, you know, with a year of control, maybe an extra year of control. It's a tough one. I just don't know what it's hard for me to determine what his value is because it's still an $18 million player or rental player at that who can only DH. I just don't think the value is as high as some people seem to think that it will be. But those are all the questions from social media. I appreciate you sending those in. We're going to take another break here, and I'm going to get to all the questions and comments from those who have joined me here live. We will get to those next. The MLB playoffs are here, and you have a chance to win 100 times your money on the Sleeper app. Baseball has never been more exciting with studs like Bryce Harper, Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte for the Diamondbacks has been great. You got Evan Carter for the Rangers, Jose Altuve for Astros had a big home run. There's a lot of great players right now in the postseason in Major League Baseball. And now you can pick more or less on stats for these stars like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more in the postseason for more to win 100-time payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right, and you could win big. I love the Sleeper app. I've been using it for a while now. We have a season-long fantasy football league going on Sleeper with some Locked On Braves listeners. It's been a lot of fun. The social interaction on there is what makes the app so much, makes it so great and separates it from all the other fantasy apps out there. It really is a lot of fun being able to just communicate with those in the league right there in the app, talk trash, whatever you want to do. Joey, I see you out there. Joey Milby is killing it in our fantasy football league on Sleeper, but trust me, go out there and try it. You're going to love it. Use the promo code Locked On. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. All right, getting back into the questions here. I'm going to try and go back through the comment section and get to all these. I apologize if I missed yours. Just for future reference, I'm looking for comments that have a question mark in them as I go through. Matthew Bittingham says, "Hey Jake, my question is, why did MLB stop reseeding in the playoffs and got to a fixed bracket? Should they change it back to the old rules? The new rules discourage regular season competition." I don't think they've ever reseeded in the postseason. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think there's ever been reseeding in the postseason, but I definitely think they should. And I think that's an obvious change. That in a 7-game series for the NLDS should be obvious changes that hopefully get implemented before next season. Matt Karcher, I just don't think you can change mentality with the same exact team. Your personality is what it is. You can't really change it at this point. They need some dogs in the everyday player side. Who are you getting rid of is my question. I mean, you're not getting rid of anybody. Again, other than left field and maybe shortstop, you're not getting rid of anybody in this lineup. So something has to change for them for sure. Matthew Brittingham says, "Why do some people like to pretend rust doesn't exist in baseball? Rust is a bigger problem in MLB than any other sport. Forcing players to get rusty before the most important games of the season is bad." I agree. I'm right there with you. And I think the proof is in the pudding for these last 2 years. That we've seen it in baseball. The Astros are obviously just a different animal. We've seen what they've done already in this ALCS, but for every other team out there, it's been a huge problem. And you've seen a lot of rust for these top seeds. So it is a problem. I don't think anybody's really ignoring it, but fans of teams who are able to advance and come out of that wild card series, they don't have any problems with it. Dustin Howard, "Is there anything wrong with me thinking that we could keep the current team as close as we can? I just think we ran into a team of destiny in the Phillies." Yes. Again, I started this podcast off with that. This team is good enough to win a World Series. They got to be playing the best baseball at the right time, and they haven't done that the past 2 years. So, yeah, I mean, you could keep this whole team intact, in my opinion. Maybe make a couple of moves for the bullpen, starting rotation, And I think you come back next year and still win a World Series if you're playing your best baseball in October. Sports living at ATL, watching the playoffs is sickening right now. Braves let us down. Yeah, it's a little bit tough. I still enjoy it though. Look, I had a day, kind of get over it. There's so many other bigger things going on in life. I got over this one pretty quickly, to be quite honest with you. Matt Carter, regression's bound to happen for a lot of these hitters. I think career years happen for RC and Ozuna. Who do you really expect to perform better next year? Maybe Murphy not tailing off. I think Murphy, it's kind of crazy to say because he was so good down the stretch. I think Michael Harris, I still think there's more in the tank for him. So I think Michael Harris. Austin Riley, I mean, it was an 850 OPS season, but I think he's an MVP level type of talent. So yeah, I could see regression for a lot of these guys, but there's still a couple there I could see, taking some steps forward. Jeffrey Cochran, do you think Morton retires? I don't know. Do you want to go out like that? Do you want to leave $20 million on the table like that? I really have no idea which way he's going to go on this. Jeffrey Cochran, do you think Ron Washington is a manager again in 2024? What is he? I think he's 72 now. I mean, his opportunities to manage are, running out. So I think if he was going to, now would be the time. I hope he doesn't obviously want Wash to stay. But yeah, again, his time's running out. If he's going to get another opportunity, I think he's got to take it. Zach Maney, Astros about to buzzsaw for the second straight year. Just incredible what they're able to do in the postseason. Sorry, going through some comments here. Jeffrey Humphreys, if you had your choice of any available left fielder at any Atlanta price, who would you choose? I don't know. Do you just mean free agents? I guess you need to give me kind of a pool of players there. I don't know any left fielder in all of baseball. Is that any outfielder I can pull into left field? I guess you said any available left fielder. So I don't know what are the available outfielders this year. I'm not even sure what it looks like out there. Let's just look at real quick left fielders for this season. I mean, Jock Peterson is obviously out there. Lourdes Gurriel, Michael Brantley, Tommy Pham. I'm just looking at left fielders. I mean, I hate to just be cliche, but Jock Peterson, he had a good time here. I don't know that he's an everyday player, but just looking at the left fielders available, I think, I wouldn't mind having him back in that clubhouse. That's for sure. And just looking at Spot Rack right now, he's apparently one of the top outfielders, all outfielders in the free agent market. So that could drive his price up, but him, Lourdes Gurriel, those are two of the top ones. I mean, I think if you're saying if I can pick any, it's probably going to be one of those guys. And I don't know how great those options are. Yeah, Zachamania, Rangers for it at a 0.64 ERA. I think I saw that's the lowest postseason ERA among any pitchers with at least 5 starts. He is just ridiculous in the postseason for whatever reason. Zachamania also said Evan Carter's from my hometown, Elizabeth, Tennessee. That's pretty cool. Wish he could come play for the Braves. I got him on a dynasty team. Mainly Joe says, do they do anything major this offseason, or is it maintain and try again next year? Kind of led off with that. I could very easily seeing this be a maintain, make some moves on the margins, and try again next year. Again, who are you getting rid of in the lineup? Where are you making a big splash in the lineup? Like maybe left field, but I just ran through the free agent options. They're not great. Maybe shortstop options aren't great, unless you're going a trade route. Maybe they make a big splash for, like I said, maybe a mid to top of the rotation starter. I just don't know where the big splash move is coming from with this Braves team. Matthew says MLB always reseeded until last season. I have to go back. I've watched baseball for 30 plus years now. I've never known them to reseed in the post. Well, okay. So growing up, if you had the wild card wasn't in the same division, then you wouldn't play the same division team in the first round. I don't know if you consider that to be reseeding. And then coming out of the wild card game, you just face the team with the best record. So, again, I'm not really aware of any reseeding that technically took place. Claire and Miguel, if the Braves do not have any significant upgrades to the team as a whole, do you think that's enough to still win the division next year? I absolutely do. Jaden Henderson, what happens with Grissom? We kind of already talked about that. I think he's either traded or you start, preparing him for a utility type role. David Agnesia, Jake, do you think Tim Anderson could experience a revival and would be the dog we could use at shortstop? I'm just not trusting him right now. It's a rough season for him. I know he's an Alabama kid, so would love for him to come over here and do well, but I think we've probably seen the best of Tim Anderson at this point. Jake, what are the chances that the Braves replace Rosario and Pilar with Grissom and left next season so they can spend their money on pitching? We just haven't seen them make that move with Grissom. And I know he's going to play winter ball. Can't remember exactly which country he's going to, but we'll see if they send him there and maybe they play him in the outfield some. But they just have been hesitant to really make that move. I don't know if they think that hurts his value in a potential trade, but they've just been really hesitant to try Grissom out in left field. Maybe they have, we don't know, and it just didn't look good. But, until they do, it's hard for me to imagine that that's their plan. Protect PR said, how much is Jock worth? Looking at Spot Racket, had him estimated for around $15 million a year. I imagine that'd be like a 2-3 year deal for Jock Peterson. So that's probably what the price would be. And that's pretty pricey for somebody who is probably not going to start against lefties. So I think that's pretty pricey. Jordan Harris, last question here. Jordan Montgomery, Cody Bellinger. Why are we even thinking about Charlie Morton? He's done. I mean, the Braves love Charlie Morton, not just for what he does on the field, where he was still a really good, middle of the rotation type starter. But they also like him for his leadership in the clubhouse with the pitching staff, helping the young pitchers. So it goes beyond just what he does on the field. No snap attack. I don't think we re-sign Marcel after the season. I think we get another good year out of him. You'd be thankful for it, and you kind of part your ways there. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for all the questions that were submitted. Thanks for joining live. Thanks for watching on YouTube, replay, whatever you do to support the show. Thank you so much. Follow us on social media, Shortstop Ball, and at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.